In today's economy, especially with AI, especially with all that kind of stuff, authenticity is your currency. Being able to tell your story effectively in a way that moves people emotionally.
This is something that every brand really does need to be taking more seriously. How do you paint that picture?
Whenever we work with any client, it's always, this is a results base. It doesn't make dollars, doesn't make sense. If we're putting money into a campaign, if we're putting money into content, what's the net result? So when we work with marketing companies like yourself, we say, okay, great, we can give you the shiniest, most perfect content ever, but if it's not deployed correctly, you're not going to see any results with it.
When it comes to production, there's so many ways that it can go south. So creating the predictable success so that you know exactly what you're getting, this is exactly how it's going to work, that clarity, I think, is everything. Today, I am joined by Kevin G. Lee, who is the CEO of Astria Studios and a renowned and awarded filmmaker and producer. Thank you, Kevin, for joining me today. I am so excited to dive into your background. We've been talking off air, and you, of course, to make it in film, you've been and done the LA scene, but now you are based here. You're originally from here. So talk to me a little bit about how you got into becoming a producer, becoming a filmmaker, and then what led to opening Astria, but also what brought you back into Arizona.
Well, when I started doing film, I never really thought that this was my path. I loved film, even from a young kid. I loved, the music in particular, from film, but I never looked at it as a career path. I had invested into film in a couple different films early on, and didn't do so well on that, but I was always very interested in it. In 2006-07, when the market kind of collapsed, it gave me a chance to kind of reevaluate what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so I played in bands and I was a musician, and I decided, I really want to do the music for the movie. So I did that. I created a company where we did music. I worked on, the background music and everything, had a lot of music placed, from a catalog that I worked with, and did that for a while and just really loved the part of filmmaking. And along the way, I became friends with a director. I worked with him several times, and he said, hey, do you want to produce my next project for me? And I'm like, sure, because I'd had some project management background, and I did that in finance and everything. And I started getting into it, and I fell in love with it because it used my whole skill set, and it allowed me to be involved in the creative process from the very beginning. So that's very much what I loved, was creating something, just coming up with an idea and then making it happen and then putting it out there and then, getting people's response to it. And it especially loved, when people say hey, that meant so much to me, or, I really enjoyed this or that. That's what really got me going, is I got to be involved in everything, not just one component. Granted, I sometimes I miss doing music, but on the last film that I did the music on that as well. So I guess I get to kind of
You get to pick and choose.
I get the best of both worlds. I get to do what I want when I want. So, but it's been a long road to get there.
Of course.
But that's kind of my story on how I got into it. I worked for a few different studios, a few different production companies. Was the head of production for companies out in LA. Most of my career was based in LA, in Atlanta, New York. And so none of it was really here in Arizona. But, this is where I was born and raised. This is what I love, and my family's here. And so I always wanted to kind of bring this back to Arizona. And when I finally got to the point in my own career where I said, okay, I want to create something for myself, and I created Astria, I parked it here because I can be wherever I want. All the films that I do that are elsewhere. I mean, we have a film in Spain that's filming right now. We have a film that we're looking at in New York. We have one that we're going to shoot here. So it's all over the world. So I can be wherever I want to be, and I can go and I can come back, when I choose. But Arizona has always been home, and it's why I also want to bring Hollywood here, right? Because we can do that at this point. So that's been my direction as of lately.
I love that. Speaking of the project in Spain, that's the one with Walton Goggins and Chloe Grace Moretz, correct?
That's correct. Yep. It's a project called Mr.
Okay. Very cool. So random question, but none of us who are not well-versed in making a film and all the pieces that go into it, from the time that you shoot it, how long does that typically take to just shoot? And then how long from the point where you wrap shooting to we're seeing it in the movie theater or on the streaming platform?
That's a great question. So, Look, every film has its different things. The one in Spain, that one is an action movie, so it takes a little while longer to shoot. So that, you can expect something like 60 days, 2 to 3 months that's going to take to shoot something like that. And then when you're in editing, you can expect probably another 9 months or so in editing, where you're going to go through the edit, you're going to go through sound and score and visual effects and color and all those things in post that make the movie as polished as possible. Or we can have like another production, the one that we want to do here is a 24-day shoot.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, that's it. Because it doesn't have all the action sequences. It's more, there's more lines, there's more drama to it. It's a fun kind of comedic, dark comedy that we're doing here. And so it's much less time to shoot. Editing is probably similar. We're looking at maybe 5-6 months in editing. Okay. So it's a shorter process, but it's also a smaller movie in both scope and scale.
Right.
So the bigger ones, if they have a lot of visual effects, that takes a while. The edit usually is around 10 weeks, to get the director's cut on that. And then you're, maybe doing different versions, or you're, maybe do a test screening. Like we did a test screening for a movie that we did here in December of last year, where we brought an audience into a theater. We gave them all the clipboards and we said, okay, give us your thoughts on this. And it helped us shape the way that we are doing the project going forward after doing the test screening. So there's a lot of process to it, right?
So I would say, like 2 years on a quick time frame from when you wrap shooting to when you're actually going to be seeing it?
I think that's a pretty accurate timeline. And that's what we usually tell people, like, if we're working with investors or whatever, we say, like, look, expect 2 to 3 years before you're kind of seeing a turnaround on the movies that are doing, that we're doing. It could be a little bit longer if you're in development for a while. Mm-hmm. We have 2 movies that are, monster movies. So it took about a year for the costumes to be created. Wow. And these are animatronic costumes. We have an actor who's 7 feet tall who plays the character. So it's molded specifically for him. And it took a while for them to place the fur, because they're putting each individual follicle into the suit. And again, the animatronics, it takes a while to build, to test.
Yeah.
So when we did the test screening, it was of this. So we took the creature suit and we did it, and we put everything together. We're like, okay, how does this work? How does it sell on screen? And there was a lot of really good positive feedback, and there was some that, like, oh, it'd be better this way. So then we kind of went back to our creature company and said, okay, well, how about we change this and change this? So it really helped define that element of the movie. So when we go and actually shoot the movie, it's much more put together than had we not done that. So sometimes the process can be much longer, and sometimes it can be very quick. It really just depends specifically on the project.
That's crazy. Okay, so let's pivot over to commercial video. We haven't talked about that at all. Of course, film sounds like the most fun projects that you can be working on. Mm-hmm. And of course, the ones you're going to be the most renowned for. It's rare that we watch a commercial and then we start thinking about that commercial for days, months, years later, right? Mm-hmm. So how did you end up pivoting from film and then adding in commercial video?
Well, actually, it started the other way around. So when I got into the industry, I got in by doing music videos, commercial videos. So I worked for a commercial production company. That's where I got a lot of my production chops, So I learned how to be very efficient and move very quickly on it, doing a lot of budgets. Commercial work is constant. It was the thing that was there. It's what I essentially grew up on doing. And, I traveled all over the world doing it. And had a lot of fun doing that commercial. But you're right, like, it's not as sexy as doing the film. It's not as yes, there are awards for commercials,
yes,
but no one talks about them, right?
Yeah.
So I started out doing that and did rather well. Ran a couple companies and took them from small on up to big, and worked with agencies. FCB out of New York City on Madison Avenue, Frederick Swanson in the South. So I worked all over the country with all the biggest brands and did these projects, and it was probably around, just prior to COVID, when, again, things were kind of slowing down a little bit. I kind of got this bug, is like, what, I really want to transfer over to narrative, because that's why I got into it, really, because I wanted to do feature film, but I never did, because you kind of get, the golden handcuffs of doing something that pays really well and
there's a lot
going.
of work.
was a
There's
lot
always
of
a
work.
need.
Versus like, taking the gamble of like, okay, I'll do a film and then there's nothing. And then, kind of the big ups and downs.
Right.
But when everything slowed down because of COVID, I kind of took that leap. So I took what I knew from commercial and then I went and did a film. So I financed this film. It was a smaller film. We shot it during COVID. We actually worked with SAG and everything, developing a lot of the protocols during that time for shooting a movie. And we shot an entire feature film in 5 days.
That's insane.
Yes, it was. I don't recommend it. Wouldn't do it again. But I took
that's crazy.
I took what I learned from that and I brought that forward. So it's helped, bring cost downs and on productions and stuff. And we did that movie and it was well received. We sold it to Showtime and Paramount, and that was kind of the entry into it. So the market or the environment at the time kind of helped spur the change. So I got to go and do now what I wanted to do, which was start doing the film. So that was the first kind of foray into it. And then, part of what we do in commercial is, because I've done it, because, it's near and dear to my heart, I wanted to kind of bring that back, keep my guys busy, keep, production going, but bring what I've learned from LA, from Hollywood over to the commercial side.
Right, because you can shoot a commercial in a day. That's not something that typically takes weeks on end to do. And if it does, then it's going to be quite the commercial. Mm-hmm. And everybody needs it. So let's pivot into that for a second. When you're counseling clients, this is something that we struggle with, to think about commercial video beyond just being a piece of content and as something that really is driving their business outcome. How do you paint that picture?
Oh, that's a great question. So in today's economy, especially with AI, especially with all that kind of stuff, authenticity is your currency. Being able to tell your story effectively and in a way that moves people emotionally, because like everyone can provide essentially the same product, right? We work with dentists and lawyers and, like every single company. There's not really one company that can offer something that someone really can't, with a few exceptions.
Yeah.
But what they can offer is themselves. People do business with you because of who you are, not necessarily because of what you provide. So it's always best to put that forward and tell people this is who we are. This is the why you should care. So even the metrics that are boosted by Instagram and by Meta and everything, it's all authentic, high polished stuff versus the AI stuff versus the stuff that's very, we shot it on our iPhone and we put it out there. That's not getting boosted. What's getting boosted by, all the content, at least Meta
algorithms and engines.
The algorithm is authenticity, right? It's high quality, high polished. This is who we are. And we've seen results from people on that say like, look, this took me, from here on up to here, because it really puts you out there. And, we're a big proponent of how you do anything is how you do everything. Mm-hmm. So if you put that kind of care and attention into that outward facing piece, people just inherently understand that and they get a sense of what your brand is. So that's your first real introduction to you and your brand, is what you put out there. That content, and using content to your benefit to create that story, to create your own narrative, goes down to how we shoot it. What colors are we coloring it with? What are you wearing? Like the music that's behind it, that all goes into weaving that narrative of who you are. And it's going to help reach that client base. For example, we had one client who they provide medical equipment.
Okay.
And theirs was, we want this very clinical, sterile type of thing. There's a lot of science behind it. So this is what you can trust, right? And so we used a lot of, stark white, lab coats and everything like that, which is like, oh, okay, there's a lot behind it that's going to sell. This is why I should believe you, right?
Right.
And then we have other clients where they want to create that kind of familial environment where like, hey, we're just like you, we've got families and everything. And so it's very comfortable. So there's warmer tones, there's more of a casual environment. So a lot of that goes into the pre-production meeting that we would have where we talk about the creative side of it. So we work with clients as individuals, not just a one size fits all, but because I have the experience and because I have all the resources, I can kind of deliver that basically, Hollywood level on an Arizona budget, essentially, right? So,
which is amazing. And that's actually something that we've struggled with, is that commercial video, we know how essential it is to being able to bolster your brand and continue growing in the right direction. And people pay us for results, right? I started here and I want to be up here. How do I get there? And so when it comes to the commercial video component, we do not have the team for all of that. It's very specialized. As you know, a lot of people say, oh, we do video. Well, we know the type of video we do, and it's in studio, it's controlled environment. It's not, hey, we're going out to the Grand Canyon and someone's going to be, cliff diving, and it's going to be a Cliff Bar commercial, and there you go. We aren't equipped for those types of things, but that doesn't mean the need isn't there. So by meeting you guys, this is a really great synergistic opportunity, because, hey, this is something that every brand really does need to be taking more seriously. And the good news is it doesn't have to come at that Los Angeles price tag in order to be able to build something really beautiful with impact. So it's great that you guys exist and that you chose to come back here and kind of stake your claim in the sand, if you will. But something that we have struggled with lately when we've talked about this is AI. So a lot of people are saying, Adidas just did an entire commercial and it was completely AI generated. Why am I going to invest $10,000, $20,000, $40,000 in a commercial video piece? So what's your perfect rebuttal to that?
Well, the cat's out of the bag on AI, right? Like, it's not going away. But a very similar conversation was had, probably before your time, but, my time was back in the 90s when there was a lot of CG that was coming out, and they said, oh my goodness, it's going to take jobs away from animators and it's going to be terrible. And it swung really far in that direction, but then it came back, as people learn to use it. But just like any tool, can be overused. So one of the negative sides of AI is that, because, especially if you do it in an open source way, it cannot be copywritten. So you may have some issues when it comes to that. That's why you're generally not going to see it in things like movies, unless it's done in an environment that it's not, pulling from other sources in order to develop that. So there's lots of caveats to using AI. AI definitely helps bring costs down. It will speed processes up, but it's not going to eliminate creative, right? You still need someone that can do the creative, and it's not going to replace you. If you're selling yourself, you can't do that with an AI anything. Maybe if you have, a product or something like that, you can get away with using it to a degree. Yeah. But AI in general, is a tool. It's not quite there yet. It helps speed the process up on a few different things, but you need to use it appropriately. So when we talk with clients about AI, and that's one of the things specifically, is they say, okay, well, what if I did this? And it's like, okay, well, let's show you some examples of things that are done in AI. And it's almost, intuitively you realize that the soul isn't there, right? Like, it's missing something.
Oh yeah, I mean, every character's dead in the eyes.
Exactly.
To start.
And, not to mention, again, the algorithm is not promoting that. They're, downplaying that. And, just me personally, whenever I come across a reel or something that I'm scrolling and it's an AI voice, it doesn't matter what it is, I immediately go past it. So people kind of have this, just this rebuttal to it, themselves, that they're going to reject it and say, okay, we just don't like it. I'm not a purist to say, like, you can't use it, but you're going to use it to augment what you have that's already real. You're not going to replace, yourself with an AI version of you going out there and talking. So
I'm with you on that. However, there is an app that somebody had sent me where you upload a video. Say I would take a podcast episode and just cut my portion, and I would upload it and say, okay, make me into my AI version. And I look very real. It speaks like me. It's got my voice, and then I tell it what it's going to be talking about, and then it spits out a video. And I see them all over TikTok, and I hate it because I can clearly tell that it's not actually the person sitting down having a real conversation. They're kind of cheat coding it to where they didn't have to get ready that day. They just typed it into their computer, and there it went. But you're saying the algorithms really don't appreciate that.
They don't.
On the whole.
Yeah, and it is going to derank that and not put that out there. And that's not what you want,
I agree. I wouldn't want someone to look at my brand and think, oh, it's just fake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the same thing with using, like AI images for your, this is my profile.
Headshots.
Yeah.
Oh,
like everyone sees that. Right. Yeah. And so again, like what are you putting out? What is your brand? And you may think you're getting away with it, but you're not. Like, you're basically selling tomorrow away for kind of a short-term gain right now. But in any situation, we always look at it and we say, okay, look, cost is one thing, value is another. We always talk about, okay, what's the value, what you're getting? Because I don't think there's anyone out there, if I said, okay, if you give me $1 million, I'm going to give you $5 million back, that wouldn't take that deal, right? It's a great deal.
Yeah.
So whenever we work with any client, it's always, this is a results base. If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, right? So if we're putting money into a campaign, if we're putting money into content, what's the net result? So when we work with marketing companies like yourself, we say, okay, great, we can give you the shiniest, most perfect content ever, but if it's not deployed correctly, you're not going to see any results with it. And likewise, you may have a great pipeline, but if you don't have the content to put out there, it's almost doing you more disservice by putting yourself out there, not looking like what you're supposed to look like, being inauthentic to your own brand.
Yep.
So you really need this combination, this working hand in hand with, creatives and production to give you the highest quality, best looking, shiniest piece of something, and putting it in a place where it actually makes sense. So if you're spending more money doing that, but in doing that, you're making more money, most business owners will look at this and say that is of high value.
Yep.
But I agree with a lot of people that just making content is a waste of money.
Yeah.
But you have to be very targeted. You have to be very specific. You have to have your brand in mind. And working with creatives that know and understand, both how to achieve that and then how to implement it is key in any environment, any relationship that you're going to have with a marketing company or so on and so forth. You have to have real clarity with where you're going.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're just going to wander around aimlessly. You're going to waste money. You're going to waste time,
Yep.
and that's not effective for anyone.
It really isn't. I would love to see this resurgence of intentional content creation versus just content for the sake of content. We talked offline about, especially in Arizona, probably everywhere, the commercials that you see for these lawyers, these legal firms, and some of them are investing in, doing commercials that are actually engaging or make you stop and watch. And then others are, in a dingy corner of their office, like role playing with an iPhone. And it's so crazy how the pendulum can swing. And they've taken that terrible piece of content and they've put money behind it because we're seeing it on our televisions, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, just imagine had they been more intentional, had actually hired a real production company to put something impactful together, what that result would be versus just doing, I would say, the bottom of the barrel.
Well, you're exactly right. And some of the things that were most effective, from an ad campaign, they really focused on the emotion of it. So we worked with a client, and they're a very large company. It was a direct client thing. We worked with them, and they came to us and said, okay, we want 2 commercial spots, one to make them laugh, one to make them cry. The very traditional actor, you see the happy mask and the sad mask, right? So, and this particular client, without naming who they are, like, you would look at this and be like, okay, how is that going to happen, right? Because their industry, not something that people would particularly associate with those kind of emotions, very boring. But we put together an entire campaign for them, shot these 2 different commercials. We tested it, and it tested extremely well, where people started watching it because of what was there. And it put their brand in a completely different light, as opposed to just something that, it's a necessity and there's no difference between this competitor or that competitor. It's just, okay, whoever's closest to my house. But then in watching this, you're like, oh my goodness, like I see the brand behind it. I see why that makes it different. So it separated them out from all their other competitors, and they had a huge success with it, to the point where we did multiple with them, right? So that campaign started something that they got success from. And those are the kind of campaigns that we like to be involved in, because we get to sit down and we get to develop, that creative. We get to work with agencies and say, okay, what is actually going to be the most effective part of putting this out?
I love that. I love when you can think outside of the box and say, how can we make a really boring industry something that someone actually wants to watch the full commercial of? I think it's funny how the Super Bowl ads are such a thing in American culture where everybody's like, oh, I can't wait to see what the ads are. And a lot of the times, I mean, we know those ad spots cost millions and millions of dollars, but a lot of them kind of fall flat. Have you seen any that, or have you guys produced any, first off? But second of all, have you seen any that really did stick with you and you're like, that was some creative work right there?
Well, I've never done a Super Bowl ad. We were in talks with a company to do it, but they ended up not doing it. But a friend of mine, he was responsible for the Old Spice ad where the guy's like, and I look up here and I look back here and that stuff. So his ad agency was responsible for that. And I love seeing that kind of stuff because it created, it created a phenomenon. There was memes about it, right? Over your product, which was deodorant, right? Like how do you create something that is very ubiquitous, that's commonplace, and then turn it into a cultural icon. Right now, you've created something that's memeable, that's viral, that people look at and say, "This is fantastic," right?
And you get the organic reach out of that. That's not even anything they had to pay for post.
Exactly. They just did it for the Super Bowl commercial, right?
Yeah.
And then it became something that had, a lot of longevity. So likewise, you really want to put the same care and attention. Just because it's a Super Bowl ad doesn't mean it's any less important than doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So yes, you're spending a lot of money to put it on the Super Bowl, but not everyone can do that. But everyone can still put the same care and attention into, an ad campaign that is, that you're going to boost out on Instagram or Meta or, wherever. You can still put that same amount of, care and thought into it. So when we work with people, we sit down and we work with them and say, again, it's the pre-production meeting where we're like, okay, this is the brand. Are we all unified? You're approving boards. If there's actors in it, you're approving the actors. But it all comes down to, is this authentic to your brand? We had a client out of New York that was a pharmaceutical company, and what they wanted is this very authentic, conversation. It was a female-driven pharmaceutical, and so they would have basically two girlfriends, which were they were at a nail salon or they were at a park or they were at a coffee house, and they were just talking just like in real life. It's almost like you're watching two friends have a conversation, and they would talk about this need in my life, and this is how I fill that need, right? This is my solution to it, and became very real. You as an observer get to see that and say like, okay, I've seen that, I experienced that in my life. It was a lot more approachable than the list of side effects that are associated with any medication. Like it was very natural, and that's what they were going for. So we took 4 actual users of the product, and then we paired them with 4 actors. And so, we went through the casting process. We found the perfect matches. Like, okay, these look like real friends. They had chemistry, so we did screen tests with them, and we put them together, and we basically just allowed them to talk. And so the actor, had lines that they were kind of prompted with, but it was very much a real conversation. So when we filmed it, it was this kind of slice of life, right? This is what everyone does, whether they are at a coffee house together or walking on the streets, and just talking with their friends. Like it became a real conversation. So when we shot that, it's funny enough because like they had already spent, the money and did an entirely other commercial campaign, and they didn't like it. It wasn't being received well. And then they refilmed it, and we refilmed it. So we didn't film the first one, but refilmed it with our director and everything, and they loved it. They're like, okay, this is perfect. This is exactly what we want. So that is a perfect example of something that's aligned with your brand and something that isn't aligned with your brand. So, dollar for dollar, you can spend just the same amount on something you don't like than you do on something you do like. So you may as well pick something that is, that you like, that you trust, that is aligned with your brand. But all that has to be very deliberate ahead of time.
Of course.
So you have to go in with that idea that this is who we are, this is our brand identity, which is why we work with companies like you that can clearly establish this is our brand identity. These are our colors. This is the sound that we want to put out.
Yeah.
These are the people that we want kind of associated with our product or service. Like all that has
Here's
to
our
be thought.
demographics that we want to be like zoning in on versus trying to build a commercial piece that is something to everybody, which rarely ever works.
Yeah, it doesn't. Trying to service everyone, you end up serving no one.
Exactly.
So, but because we have clients that have different demographics too. Like being in Arizona, there's a large Spanish-speaking population, and so we have clients that say like, yeah, half of my client base is Spanish-speaking. So we will literally film the same commercial, same spot, same crew. We just switch out the actors, and one will be in English, one will be in Spanish.
Which saves a ton of money right there too.
Exactly.
Because you didn't have to go and do all the production and setup twice. It's just, hey, we've got 2 sets of actors, 2 birds, 1 stone. We're on our way.
Yeah. So we try to be very efficient with what we do too, because
that helps your budget go further.
Exactly. The real cost really comes down to the function of how many days, because you have to pay your crew, you have to pay the actors and everything like that. So the more we can do on one day, the better, which goes to our pre-production. It's like, okay, what are we trying to accomplish?
Yep.
And if we can knock out 2, 3, 4 birds with the same stone, we're going to do it, right? Because we care about the result for the client, right? It doesn't necessarily make any more sense to me to add more production days. I would rather give the client exactly what they want in the way that they can, they can digest, right? Like, not everyone has limitless budgets, and more so, especially, maybe smaller clients or even medium-sized clients, they're very budget conscious.
Of course.
So we look at it and we say, okay, well, how can we maximize that?
The smartest entrepreneurs don't just create businesses, they create content that scales them. At PS Studios, we work with high-level entrepreneurs and creators across the country. Some fly in every month to shoot with us in sunny Scottsdale. Others send us their raw footage and we turn it into scroll-stopping, authority-building content. From filming to editing to distribution, we handle it all. Done for you. Turnkey content that grows your audience, elevates your brand, and keeps you top of mind. Leaders don't wait, they create. Schedule your call today.
Okay, so say I come to Astria and I say, I want to do a commercial for PS, and I've got really dumb ideas. How do you guys help get me out of my dumb thinking and into something that you think is going to actually perform a lot better? Because at the end of the day, you've done this 1.5 million times. You know what, you can have that bird's eye view of being like, this is a really, really bad concept that she's going for. How do you kind of turn those tables to get a higher quality,
Well,
direction?
that's a tricky conversation, because there are some clients that are dead set. You brought up the examples of the attorneys, shooting in their dingy office. Like, there are some that we've talked to that believe that is the way to go, right? And in that, look, I can't help you, but ultimately, I don't want to put my name on something that I'm not proud of.
Of course.
So
I feel the exact same way.
if you're dead set on you want to do this and there's no other way, maybe this is not the best thing for you.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that respectively. Respectfully, I say okay, maybe we're not aligned on this. But I always like to start with that end goal in mind, because sometimes people have okay, in my mind, I have this, I want to do this, I want this result, but they don't quite know how to get there.
Right. And I think a lot of people come, especially to us, in that same exact position. And so it's our job to try and help get that journey put in place so that we can reach that end goal. But I'm curious how you guys do that, because it's such a creative process.
It is. And, the first step with any client always comes down to education.
Yeah.
Because they may have no idea what production is, what creative is. They may have an idea, but that idea also may not be doable at all. We had one client that they said, oh yeah, we really wanted, without naming too much, because I don't want to put that there, they had some very expensive ideas that they thought would be great. And they would. But in doing those, I was like, okay, we're travel, right? So we have to go from this location to this location. It is going to extend the amount of days. And, you're asking for cars and you're asking for things. I'm like, just be aware, this is what you're asking for. Is this what you're
there's a good $2 million commercial right there.
Yeah, champagne tastes on soda pop budget, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it is education, saying okay, let's talk about, again, what your goal is. What is your desired effect? Because I work with creatives all the time, be it a director or whatever, and maybe they have a really good idea. And my job isn't to say no. My job is to make it happen, right? But the integrity of the project is kind of the main thing. So like if it's not possible or it puts the entire production in jeopardy, I'm obviously going to say, let's try working in this parameter. So it's always an alternative, to what they have. So I'm never just going to flat out say no or that idea is terrible. It's guiding them in a way that they still are getting what they want. So it's a delicate conversation, not just with anyone, because this is their baby. Like,
of course,
their product is their baby, and they may have a fantastic idea. And so my goal is to make that fantastic idea doable, which could sometimes come down to creative. It could sometimes come down to logistics or, finances.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about small businesses and they say, I have $10,000 set aside to be able to do a commercial project, right? To you guys, I'm sure that that's definitely on your lower end of things, but hey, if it's within a reasonable scope, it could be achieved.
Yeah.
So just making sure that the expectation and the budget can align to actually provide a really high quality end product, even though the budget was not a $50,000, $60,000, $100,000
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, in any project, there's a $10,000 version, a $100,000 version, $1 million version. Like,
right.
It just depends on what you want to do. So my objective isn't to come in and say yes or no to it. It's really to say, it's come up with a how.
Yep.
Right. So if you say, hey, I want to do this, I'm like, okay, this is how we can do it. Right. Which sometimes may be, let's realign the creative on this, but I'm generally building off of what they want to accomplish that same goal, just maybe in a different way. So if they say, hey, we want, this star-studded, celebrity endorsements, which we can do, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
We have the relationships with the agencies, we know how to do it. But just so you're aware that this is what this comes with. You want this actor to come out here and do it, expect something like a $50,000 fee for it, right?
Right.
And if that's a benefit to you, then I can make it happen for you. I can have all the contracts drawn up and all the, releases signed and everything like that, so you can actually take it and do something. But if, that's shocking you and it doesn't you can't do that, okay, fine.
Yeah.
What is the same way? How are we going to get that same that feeling? Like, what did you want from the celebrity endorsement? Did you just want fame? Did you just want this person in it? Or did you want a testimonial side of it? Did you want something that people can believe that they're like, okay, great, this person likes it, so I want to like it too. There may be other ways to accomplish that that are going to fit within your scope, within your brand. Because we've also dealt with clients who maybe their idea of what their brand isn't really aligned with what the clients, meaning their clients' idea of what the brand is.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to put them on the same table, be like, okay, this is what the perception is. If we want to change the perception, we can do that. Or if we want to lean in the perception, then we need to tailor it more this way. But it does become a very targeted conversation between us and the clients as to how to achieve their goal versus just do what they say. There's plenty of people out there that will just do what you say.
Oh, I've run across a lot of that, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I'm partnering with another agency in any way, shape, or form, I'm looking to them to be the expert in that arena at which we know our resources just do not lend themselves. And if somebody's just a yes person, that's easy to work with, sure. But at the same time, I know that's not going to give us that top tier level of production that we're looking for. In any arena. It could be my paid ads guy, right? He's brilliant. It's all he does day in and day out. And he will tell me if the client's idea for their ad campaign is terrible. He's like, that's not going to perform. I know that because I just did a campaign similar to that a couple weeks ago. It was a flop. Let's do this instead. And that's the kind of stuff that I think a lot of people want, is that honest communication and honest direction. Because at the end of the day, this all takes resources.
It does. And those are the kind of clients that you want too. And like, even as a business owner, and I'm sure you're the same way, is like, you hire people that are the best at what they do, and then you trust them on that, right?
Yeah.
You can't be the best at everything.
No.
Right? So, you're going to hire your person, whether maybe it's a graphic designer, and you're like, okay, well, what's the best way to do it? And they're going to let you know. So ideally, your clients are hiring you because you're the expert. And then they're relying on what you say. If you say like, look, I love the idea that you came up with. Here's the best way to implement that to get the results that you want.
Yep.
Generally, they're going to listen to you because that's why they're paying you, right?
Exactly. And the trust is already there.
The trust is there. And, especially to get someone's business and then to keep it for a long time, you do that by delivering results, right? And sometimes that is telling the client no, like sometimes it is, it is telling them like there's a better way to do it, right? We have a client recently that, in their mind, this was the best way to do it. And again, being vague intentionally here, but like this was the best way to do it. And I said, I can appreciate that, but would you mind if I put you in touch with some other people? Like, don't take my word for it, but let me put you in touch with some other people that we work with, and they'll work with you on that. And just to give you an idea, because I want you to make your decision with your eyes wide open here, you need all the information in order to make that decision. So
that's a really nice way of doing it. I'm going to steal that one.
Well,
next time someone tells me I'm dead set on this, I'm going to say, well, you should talk to Kevin.
There you go. Look, I'll back you up on that too.
Exactly.
Like generally speaking, like we want to do stuff that's effective for our clients, right?
Yeah.
We both of us are in the same boat where, repeat business is what keeps us going. Right? We don't want to constantly being out there, churning
chasing
through the same thing, right? So you get that client and you retain them, and you do that by, again, delivering the results. And
being easy to work with too. I think that's another really big thing, especially in the production world. There's a lot of egos that can come along with that. We've worked with some people who just are like very, very not easy to work with. And the client then gets rubbed the wrong way. And they're like, I don't know why you brought this third party in when this guy is an absolute asshole in every way, shape, and form. And so making sure that you've got a team that doesn't lead with ego is a really big differentiator, I think, when it comes to keeping those clients happy for the long term.
Yeah, they have to feel, maybe this is cliche, but they have to feel like, family or friends, where, I can approach you, I can call you later and be like, hey, tell me about this, right? And you're going to give it to me straight, right? So they have to feel like you're on their team and you're an asset to them.
Yep, exactly.
And that comes with trust. It comes with the relationship, because I was told once, are people going to do business with you because they like you? Not necessarily. But are they going to do business with you if they don't like you? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So, being likable, being approachable, being, feeling like you're on the same page, that you understand their business is what is extremely valuable. And we put that same care into, a small company as we do in a large company. And that's one of the benefits that we have at Astria is that the bulk of our business comes from our movies.
Yeah.
This is what we do. Everyone is employed doing that. But because of my love for the commercial world, because that's where I came up from, like I wanted to offer that and be like, look, it keeps my guys busy. It keeps, my team's running, but it allows me to kind of offer this in a way that I think most other production companies can't really touch. So like I don't have to, first of all, I don't have to take the production.
Right. Of
so
course.
I'm going to work with clients that I want to work with, right? And I'm going to work with brands that I want to work with. And also I can deliver things that most production companies can't because I have the resources to do it.
Of course.
So in many cases, people are like, well, you're a big company, you do all this stuff, must be expensive. I'm like, actually, it's the opposite. Because everything is coming in off of this, I can now do a lot more on this side and give you a lot more for a lot less. So
yeah, I feel like that's got to be the biggest misconception that everybody says, well, if you're doing huge feature films that are, box office hits, then I can't afford your services for a commercial. That would be insane. And you're like, nope, that's the silver lining.
Yeah, the silver lining is that because I have those resources, I can give them to you at a much bigger discount.
Right.
So when, the client is out there thinking like, okay, how do I achieve this? There's a lot of tricks that I can, pull from, a lot of resources that I can pull from in order to deliver it. Right. So my goal is to give the clients the absolute most that I can for this because we're developing relationships. We want to keep things going. And again, like my love for Arizona too, like I want to do stuff here. Like I never got to do stuff here. We were talking before this and I was kind of explaining my background and of all of the places I've shot, I've only shot in Arizona once.
Which is crazy.
I know. So like
we have a great business environment here, as you know, right? There's so many tech startups that are launching out in Arizona. Our economy, in my opinion, is excellent. So this seems like such an untapped resource, Astria in general.
Well, and that, for companies too, they look at it and they don't know what's available here. And to a large degree, they're kind of correct, is that, they'll bring in a company from LA and so they'll have to pay to bring them in. They'll have to pay to put them up. They'll have to do all that kind of stuff in order to do it, because they think that that's the only place that they can, get that level of quality. And to some degree, they're correct, right?
Right.
But when I ran a couple studios out here, I saw those same productions that would come in, and what I offered to my clients is like, look, I can provide basically all the same to you. You don't have to bring that in.
Yeah.
And so for them, they're like, actually, that saves us quite a bit of money. I'm getting the same or better results, from doing this. They weren't aware that these resources were here.
Exactly.
So again, being able to provide that locally, and to clients that otherwise wouldn't have been able to do it, or could do it but at a much higher cost, they love it.
Well, and as an agency owner, it's great to have a resource like that, because of course clients want that shiny, awesome thing. And typically you think of a high level commercial and it's going to be, Los Angeles or New York is where you're going to have to get your production from. But now knowing, hey, there is actually an amazing local resource, and it's not like you guys are just a little Arizona studio that, had a passion and did a few commercials here and there. You're doing films, you've been doing commercials for a majority of your career.
Yeah.
All of that lends itself to instant trust, because you're like, oh, let me look at this portfolio really quick. Wow, I didn't know that was here. And now you've got a relationship with these companies with agencies. I'm like, this is such an untapped resource. This is great that they exist.
Yeah.
Thank God you've got business development going out and meeting with other agency owners so that we know and we can utilize and tap in, because that only makes our clients love us more. We've been able to bring a really, really high level service to them, and they didn't have to spend $30,000, $40,000 just to get the crew from New York or LA.
Exactly. And that's what people need. One of the great things about technology that makes things a lot more accessible, that's a plus, right? Brings costs down on that. And the negative is that there's a lot of people that say they can do something, and they really can't. It's the guy just right out of film school that thinks that they know it, but doesn't, right? Yep. And so, or hey, my niece or my nephew, they've got a camera and they can do this, right? And they get very much what they pay for, right? But not knowing or not understanding, okay, this is what it actually is. And whenever we do things, we actually do it according to industry standards. So the AICP guidelines basically say this is what it is. So when we put stuff out, the client sees exactly what it is. They see every line item in the budget. This is what it's going to. It's very, very clear. So they know exactly what it is that they're paying for. They know exactly what it is that they're going to get. And there's no ambiguity. There's no vagueness to that. So when clients then come back to us, they know exactly what to expect, and they can plan for it. So that's another key thing, is that a lot of the, would-be production companies, and this is what I saw firsthand, is that they're not doing it the right way. And in not doing it the right way, maybe they've put some clients off to it. Maybe they worked with the wrong production company and they said, oh, I was treated this way, therefore I don't like it. So what we try to do is we do things the correct way. We do things according to the industry standard, and the results are predictable, right? Yep. So they can look at it. Every client is confident in what it is, and they know what they're getting at the end. And working with great partners, they know what the result's going to be.
Yep.
And so we can help tailor that specifically, very white glove service to them. And for us, it doesn't take any more effort than.
Well, it's about creating predictable success.
Yeah.
That's really what we're always after for our clientele in every arena. And when it comes to production, there's so many ways that it can go south. So creating the predictable success of that, exactly what you're getting. This is exactly how it's going to work. That clarity, I think, is everything.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, as a business owner, and you would probably agree with me on this, I can handle any problem as long as I know what it is, right? It's the unknown that creates the problems, right?
Yep.
But if you can go walk into something and say, okay, great, this is what I can expect. And we are also very kind of upfront with our clients, like, hey, these are the expectations, right? If we do an ad campaign, just know that it's going to take around 3 to 6 months, to test it, see how it does. And if we need to make any, changes based upon that, because as much as we can do to kind of predict this, we don't know the future. So we don't know if this is going to go viral or it doesn't. No one does. If there was a formula that
We'd all be
we'd
retired.
all be, but we don't. So we try to tell them, like, look, this is our best guess, our best estimate based upon these metrics, which we share. And I'm sure you've been in the same boat, like, hey, this is what we know is effective. This is what is not effective. And these things are trending. Maybe these things are being, pushed by the algorithm. These things are not. You try to work with your client. You try to give them as much information as possible so they can make a more informed decision.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, none of us have that magic 8 ball to say, this is where this is going to pop.
Yeah.
Like, we've learned through trial and error that LinkedIn advertising is not as effective as Meta advertising. And that just, unfortunately, every time we go back to LinkedIn, we have a lesser result than when we're on Meta. And that just is what it is.
It is what it is, but like the saying is, you got to fish where the fish are, right? So like if your brand is, this very targeted demographic, don't take a shotgun approach. I mean, we do the same thing when it comes to, even promoting a film.
Yeah.
So, we were just in conversations with a film company in LA and we were looking at financing their projects. And, so they make, they're just creating a new division that's making horror films specifically for Gen Z audience. So it's a very specific niche
very
within
specific.
a niche. Yeah. So like we want, basically, 18 to 29-year-old, males and females, for this demographic. Their appetite for these kind of films is different than the other demographics' appetite. So they have a very specific and very targeted approach to it. So when we're talking about putting millions of dollars into an ad campaign to promote a film. TikTok, yeah, Instagram, like where are they? And so like the film itself very much kind of centers around that world, right? So it's not the big shotgun approach where, okay, we're going to put billboards up there on Sunset. We're going to do this. Like, it doesn't need that.
Yeah.
If we can get our audience where they're at, dollars become more effective. And likewise, in just a regular commercial campaign, if your target audience is, females between the ages of 35 and 45, don't put it out to teenagers, right? Like don't.
For sure. Don't waste your ad budget. We say that all the time. Mm-hmm. We've got clients who are like, oh, well, everybody could technically buy my product. And it's like, yeah, but everybody isn't going to buy your product.
Right.
So let's look at who has, right? What does that data tell us? If it's mostly women who are 20 to 30, then our entire ad budget is going to women 20 to 30 across TikTok, across Meta, and 20 to 30, they're really not on Twitter. That's not their arena. So probably those two platforms would be where we're pushing out those ads.
Yeah, exactly. And even so, like we've been working with, brands here, larger brands that they're saying like, look, these traditional things that we're doing before are not working for us. We want to look at other things, brands that are even, they're doing more a product integration into films. They're actually financing a film, with their products involved in it. So looking at alternative ways of kind of
like
reaching.
The placement. So I see that a lot with cars. So Mercedes has every car in said movie, that kind of thing.
Yep. So we worked with Mercedes in Atlanta when I shot a movie there, and they placed all the cars. So all the cars were Mercedes, right? So we featured that prominently. There was even a line in the movie about the guy getting a new car, and it was a Mercedes and stuff like that. So like we work with brand integration, which becomes again more natural, more effective.
Yep.
Because people will, on social media, they'll just pass by it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what they've noticed is that the recognition where, and I'm sure we've all gotten it, from Instagram or whatever, it says like, hey, have you noticed this ad in the last whatever, right?
Yeah.
And almost every time I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
same.
No, I don't know. I don't recognize anything like that, because as soon as that skip button comes up, you're going to hit it, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we reach the clients where they are? So some of these brands are looking at very different ways of approaching that. We have one company that we just talked to out of Poland that they have, speaking of AI, they have an AI technology that's not in film, but it's used for something different. It's used for a language translator. Oh. So we are looking at ways to incorporate that into a movie, which becomes natural to that movie and natural to, that campaign. So
right, like a Bond film, and then he's trying to understand a conversation of a spy that's, a couple of seats down at the bar, and then he flips out this AI or something like that.
Exactly. And the reason being is that clients are looking at this and saying like, okay, the views that I'm getting aren't real views. They're not like people aren't retaining.
They're not active buyers.
They're not. But if they're viewing a movie, that's your captive audience. They're actually watching it.
Yep.
And if you can integrate that into the movie, then great. So there's been a recent push on that kind of stuff using brands and influencers and stuff like that in order to, deliver the product to the audience in a way that is maybe more, ironically, that used to be a lot more prevalent. And then it went away, but now they're coming back to it because it's more effective than, again, that shotgun approach.
Yeah.
So in working with, your clients and any client that we would have, it's always down to crafting whatever that approach is, be it, the actual content or the delivery of the content to your specific demographic. And there is some wisdom to trying to expand your demographic. It's like, okay, our product traditionally is used by females 20 to 30, but maybe men also want to use it. Maybe we need to, have a campaign that specifically targets that. There is a time and place for that too.
For sure.
But you definitely don't want to walk away from your current market and underserve that than to overserve a market that isn't quite there yet. So there needs to be that balance and that strategy where, if a client is coming in and say, hey, we want to capture this audience, we say, okay, great.
And that really is between us as the agency and you as the production, that's such a hand-holding kind of moment because we have to be in alignment in order to be able to get to that end goal successfully. Like you've got to give me the right content that I can then go out and then hit all of my targets and it resonate with my targets more importantly.
Yes, exactly. And you get again, you got to go to where they are.
Yep.
And going back to the commercials I was talking about before, where one was to make them laugh and make them cry, they were two completely different audiences. Like one was comedic, it was about basically a son who moves back in with his parents, and her parents are both old, and so he's trying to get his life back in order, and it was very almost like a documentary, mockumentary-esque type, and that played really well with certain audiences. And the other one, was very cinematic, very kind of Nike commercial-esque, where you follow, a father and his daughter as she grows up, and you kind of watch the whole life cycle there, and you see that sentimentality that, that was a completely different audience. So like two commercials, same company, same campaign, two completely different audiences. Yep. But we did those concurrently. So we took exactly what they wanted. We shot them both at the same time, saved them money, but gave them two different markets to hit.
I love that.
So
the sky is the limit, really, right?
Yeah. So like having these conversations early on, great. Like we love coming in early to a product, production or a client like this, because then we can kind of help.
Absolutely.
Right. Coming in late, if you delivered all the boards to me and said, Kevin, film this, yeah, I could do that. I could do that in my sleep. That's okay. Right.
Yeah, but we don't even want to have to do all that, right? Like we want to rely on the people who do this day in and day out, and that is where the magic truly happens.
Yeah, and that's
not that we can't, but I would much prefer it to be at the highest of levels for my client.
Well, and that's the kind of relationships that we like to develop, right? We need to trust you, you need to trust us, client needs to trust both of us.
Yep.
And then
Let's get it
most
done.
importantly, we have to deliver on what we say, because we could tell them the sweetest sounding story and use all the best words, but if we don't deliver to them what they need and there aren't results, then
it didn't matter anyway.
It doesn't matter. It's all for nothing.
Yep.
So, quantifiable results, again, that's what we look at from the beginning, is what is the end goal? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? And that's the only metric that we can really go by, say like, okay, yeah, it may look great. Maybe it wins a Clio. Like maybe that's fantastic. Great.
Yeah, but
we love that.
I don't think any of our clients would ever, like mine at least, would even care if they won an award if it didn't perform and actually lead to ROI on.
Exactly. It doesn't matter for them.
Yeah, they're like, big
maybe
deal.
It matters for us, because then we can put that on the shelf and tell future clients, yeah, we're award winning or whatever. But ultimately, if it doesn't serve the client, it's not worth doing.
Nope.
So being able to walk in at the beginning and have these relationships with clients, individuals, or anyone for whatever reason, and create that sort of environment where they trust you completely. They can go to you and they can say, okay, this is what we want to do. What do you think? And you say, I think that's great. But
here's how we make it better.
Yes. Yeah. Or then you come to them and you say like, look, I think this is really effective. We should try this. And they say, I never would have thought of that except for you. I love it. Let's do it. Right. Those are the kinds of relationships and examples that I love because they're, and let's face it, no one likes doing, this is one of the things I hated most about the commercial side is that sometimes it was very much, paint by numbers. Like, the agency was very specific. Here it is. And we were just there to do a job. There was no passion in it. Right.
Yeah.
And, obviously there's a place for that. There's things that, people need to do to keep the lights on. I get it. But ultimately what gets me going and, the passion that I have is storytelling. It's, taking, a client and putting him or her out to the world and being able to, in a short amount of time, give the people the why behind it. Why should I care? Why should I care about you and your product or your service? And if I can accurately and articulately explain that in a short amount of time where people are like, okay, now I know why I should care. Yeah. They're going to go with you, even if maybe you're a little more expensive or maybe your location. We just
had a conversation with that actually yesterday. Client was like, I shopped a lot of places, but I really trust you. And I know that like you're the right person for the job. So even though you were the highest bid, I'm going with you. And I was like, point in case.
There you go.
Yeah.
And you do that by telling your story. Like when you present yourself to a client, when you and I first started talking, I kind of asked you the why, why do you do this? Why does this make you, why do you get out of bed in the morning to do this, right? And we talked even a little bit more about that today and your passion for what you do and, helping your clients. And you've been doing this for a long enough time where you've got that track record and you understand it.
Yeah.
Right. And you're passionate about that. Like that translates, if I were to do a commercial for you, this is what I would tell your story and I would tell, why it is that you care about your clients and this is what you portray. Like, so many times, like even clients that you may not think need sort of content, maybe they're not putting stuff out on social media, but maybe they put it on their website. Like we do a whole lot of about us videos, right?
Yeah.
You go to the website and yes, you have your thing, but why should I care, right? And then it tells your story. This is where I came from. This is why. Maybe it identifies you with a particular demographic. We had one client that said, like, look, a lot of our clients are veterans. So we really, leaned into, the patriotic side of things that really tell that story. So it helped them establish their brand. It helped them establish their identity to the client. And ultimately, it served them by getting them more of that, right?
Right.
Likewise, we're going to do the same thing. Like your story is that you care and you do high quality stuff that is really pointed to the client, right?
Yeah, and I'm honest to a fault. If I hate it, I'll tell them. I think they value that most of the time, though.
Well, I think they do. Just by the way you're talking to me now, your friendliness, you laugh and you're approachable. That kind of stuff translates. We can get that on camera and then we can deliver that to the client. I'm using you as an example, but
sure.
Really this would be
with anybody,
right? Like, how do we get this person out there? Like, how do we portray exactly what they want, whether that's them on camera or maybe we're telling a story, like one commercial spot we did for a hospital in Georgia, like southern Georgia, right? And the whole campaign with them was, our doctors, they're members of the community. They're just like you, right? Mm-hmm. So we had several different spots where, we had people in the community that were there and they said like, this person, got injured, at a softball game, and they went and saw this doctor who lived right next to them at this hospital. Like it was all about community. It was about, we are you. We're from the same community. We live in the same world. We're your neighbor.
Yeah.
And then so we did these spots that really outlined that this is what it is. That was the brand that they were trying to put forward, is that we're your neighbors.
Well, and everybody makes decisions based on emotion. So I think a lot of times in production, especially commercial, people are forgetting that. They're not hitting on the emotional strings. And therefore, it might be a great piece. It could have been entertaining, but it didn't really leave anybody with that feeling of, hey, emotionally, I connected with that. Because logic only gets you so far.
Well, you're absolutely right. And sometimes, it's the wrong emotion. Like I'm sure, you've seen plenty of commercials where at the end you're like, what am I even buying? Like what is this product? Yeah. Like maybe they did something clever and it was funny or something like that. But ultimately you're like, I don't know what this product is. Mm-hmm. I don't know how it's going to apply to me. I don't why should I care? Like, yeah, it was a funny story or something.
That's like 90% of pharma commercials to me.
Yeah. Yeah, like what am I even
bad.
buying, right? So it has to be very much aligned with your brand and who you are. So, ideas are, good ideas are a dime a dozen, right? But it does come down to execution for your particular brand. Like, how do we take this idea and tailor it specifically to you? Again, whether that's you telling your story, you're saying this is why I got into it. We had one individual who was a chef, right? And he has a food truck here, and again, like these aren't huge brands. This is a food truck in Gilbert, Arizona, right? And we created a spot for him that told a story, and by the end of it, like the reaction that I show at every people is all the same: is I want to go to the guy's food truck, right?
Absolutely.
Because now you see it behind, you see the person behind it, and again, this is why I care. It's not a nameless, faceless person anymore. It's I fell in love with this person because they had a really good screen presence, and our directors they'll coach you and coax that out of you and get that from you to help tell your story. And through editing, through music, through sound, and all these things, it helps create that emotion that people will feel. Like the saying goes, like long after someone leaves you, they'll forget what you wore, they'll forget what you said, but they'll never forget how they felt when they were talking to you.
Yeah.
So it is the emotion that you're selling, that storytelling that you're selling.
Exactly.
And that has to be very clear going into it. You're not going to just pull that out after the fact. Like you have to go
you've got to go in with intention. Mm-hmm. Okay, this has been incredible. Where can everybody find you if they want to work with you, they want to just follow you on social media, watch some of your films, all that good stuff?
Well, you'll find us at astriastudios.com. That's our main website there, and you can see our commercial side, you can see our films. But otherwise, reach out to PS Creative, because we work together. So
we do.
Yeah.
We're really excited about this partnership and what this means for our clients, the ones who are willing to take that next step into their brand elevation. I mean, this couldn't come at a better time. So I've got phone calls and some conversations to have for sure in the future. But thank you so much for joining me on this episode, and we'll catch you all next time.